Tales of Arise had a lot to live up to, not only as the next entry in the Tales series, but as one of the biggest JRPG releases of the year. It took 5 years to come out after Tales of Berseria, which is the longest we've ever had to wait for a new main mothership Tales title, and it was clear that the devs wanted to push the series truly forward with the next entry, and that fans were also ready for the Tales series to take that next big step. I myself have been a bit jaded with this series for a while now, and I wasn't 100% confident Arise would be as good as I and many others felt it needed to be. But after having now spent over 60 hours in the game and seeing the credits roll, I can say with confidence that Arise is indeed that big evolution in the Tales series that was needed. It's not perfect, not by any means, but there's so much good here that comes from taking risks and tweaking both old and newer Tales of formulas that it easily outclasses the issues. And a reminder to everyone, the goal for 2021 here on YouTube is to reach 5,000 subscribers, and with your help, I know we can do it. So subscribe if you haven't already and leave a like, it's greatly appreciated. Now, without the way, let's really dive into Tales of Arise. There exist two races and two homeworlds, the Danans from Dana and the Renans from Rena, respectively. The Renans are more technologically advanced and are capable of using magic that Danans normally cannot, and for the past 300 years, the Renans have enslaved and oppressed the Danans, using them for a combination of slave labor and resource siphoning. Our main character Alphen is a Danan slave, albeit a unique one that doesn't feel any pain. One day by chance he meets a Renan girl named Xion who causes agonizing pain to anyone that touches her, and this unlikely duo set off on an adventure to liberate Dana from Renan rule, by taking down the 5 Renan lords that hold control over the land. To no one's surprise, I'm sure, the story eventually expands and gets more interesting than this, but for most of the game, this is what's driving the characters and you to continue on. And it surprisingly kept my interest all the way to the end. There's some nice twists and turns along the way, some I saw coming and some that did manage to catch me by surprise. And probably even more so than the story itself, the characters really helped carry the adventure, and this was a cast that really blew my expectations out the water. I went in expecting most of them to be pretty one note, but to my pleasant surprise, they're all well rounded, interesting, and by the end of the adventure grow as people. Alphen is good natured, polite, and blunt, but he's not immune to getting angry and acting impulsive, or even lashing out if pushed too far. Xion comes off as cold or a typical tsundere at first, but growing up not only not being able to touch another person, but everyone you know fearing you and looking at you like a monster, has shaped her worldview into a very believable and understandable me against the world mentality. Rinwell may come across as a typical bookworm mage, but as you'll play, you'll learn that there's a lot she keeps to herself that you wouldn't guess. Law isn't a typical hot-blooded martial arts fanatic. His actions have led to a tragedy eat away at him for most of the game, and he does his best to not let it show to the others. Kisara has her entire life flipped upside down one day, and for a lot of the game doesn't know how to act towards the person that caused her to lose her supposed purpose in life. And despite Doalim's air of integrity and elegance, he's pretty self-deprecating and prone to running away from both his problems and responsibilities. No one is weak in terms of writing or uninteresting, and they all complement each other well. Now, we can't talk about a Tales game without mentioning the combat. The Tales series has arguably always been the poster child for action-based RPGs, and I was very happy to find out that Arise not only tried new mechanics and succeeded, but harkened back to older games in this series as well. Normal attacks are finally back and can be interwoven into your arts combos with ease, like in the days of old. If you're unfamiliar with the series and Tales games, your battle techniques are called arts. In Arise, you can assign 3 arts to a character to be used on the ground and 3 more for the air. And after a certain point in the game, this is doubled, allowing you to have 6 ground moves and 6 air moves, greatly expanding not only your repertoire of attacks, but your combo potential as well. The amount of combos you can pull off in Arise is tied to the arts gauge, or AG, the blue diamonds under your character. Basic attacks cost 1, intermediate arts cost 2, and there's some arts like powerful spells that could even cost 3. So long as you have remaining AG, you can continue to attack the enemy, and AG is restored by simply not attacking. At first, I wasn't sure how to feel about the split between ground and aerial combat, since arts are exclusive to only one dimension on the battlefield. But after a while, when I started getting more AG and more arts to experiment with, I ended up actually really liking it. Certain moves launch enemies into the air and vice versa, and they're always marked by arrows, giving you ideas for what you can have flow into what. But normal attacks and arts aren't the only things at your disposal in combat. Every character has a unique boost attack where you can call them in at any time with the press of the D-pad, and will not only jump in immediately to do an attack on the enemy, but each member's boost attack has a unique trait meant to deal with certain enemies. Alpha can topple most ground enemies, giving you a few seconds of breathing room to do whatever you want. Xion fires out lasers that topple aerial enemies. Everyone has a boost attack that best fits a certain type of enemy action, and each will undoubtedly save you at one point or another in the game. There's also also boost strikes, flashy finishing animations that trigger whenever you stagger an enemy long enough with combos, and a stagger gauge filling. Each character has a unique boost strike animation with every other character, and I actually never got tired of seeing these even all the way to the end of the game. And speaking on the characters themselves in combat, each is incredibly fun and unique to play, and there wasn't a single one I disliked once I found the right groove for everyone and accumulated my favorite arts. Aside from their playstyles, everyone has a special ability that further makes them unique. Alpha can sacrifice his HP to dish out big damage, Xion has bombs she can trigger special effects with, Renwell has the ability to store cast magic and fuse it with other spells for devastating effects. The more combos you do uninterrupted with Law, the more powerful his attacks become. Kisara is the only character that can block instead of dodge, and her attacks even get stronger if you activate them out of guarding. And performing a perfect dodge with Dohalim extends his staff, further increasing his attack and crit rate. All these abilities are fun to master and only further deepen Arise's very deep and rewarding combat system. Now that it's all said and done, I think I can safely say this is one of my favorite battle systems the series has ever had. I had a blast and it's implemented in a way that anyone can eventually pull off impressive and flashy combo strings, transitioning from ground to air and vice versa with finesse and ease. The battle system was what I was most worried about going into Arise, and they nailed it so well, for the most part at least. In the beginning I said that Arise has some issues, and one of the biggest for me was the new CP system. Healing and support arts in Arise now all pull from a collective point pool shared among the party called CP. And it is easily by far the most frustrating aspect of the game, and is in a way the root of other problems in the game. For most of the game it will dictate how well you do in battle, since once you're out of it you're screwed unless you're a dodging machine. In boss battles it runs out quickly, restoring it is costly since orange gels are stupid expensive now, but I'll get back to that in a minute, and the game even makes you spend it out of combat sometimes to solve field puzzles. Now, in many cases you can teleport back to an inn or campfire to restore CP, or in front of bosses there's usually a restore point to get all of it back, but it doesn't change the fact CP was a constant annoyance throughout my playthrough, and the only way to increase it is to take down super bosses spread throughout the world. And on the subject of bosses, this was another area where Arise dropped the ball. They tried some new things to make bosses stand out more in this game, namely bosses don't normally stagger now until specific conditions are met, and the fact many of them are HP sponges. You'll now see the HP of bosses across the top of the screen, and once you knock off a bar of HP or if you break an orange glowing spot on their body, then they'll topple over and allow you to hit them without consequence for a bit. Otherwise, you can hit an enemy with a 200 hit combo and they will keep on coming at you the whole time like you're slapping them with a napkin. This on its own isn't that fun, but a major issue this creates that I noticed early on is that smaller humanoid enemies not staggering means your aerial attacks from most of your characters are rendered useless. If you're someone like Xion who rains down attacks from the sky, this really isn't an issue, but for characters like Alphen and Law who need precise timing and need to carry the enemies through the sky with them, that's basically half of their moveset rendered useless in humanoid boss fights. It's a design oversight I was frankly shocked made it in. And on the subject of bosses being HP sponges, unless you're willing to lower the difficulty for boss battles, you'll be hacking away at bosses for what feels like forever, even if you're properly leveled and have been keeping your equipment up to date. And this ties back into CP, since for me personally, my small CP pool could not keep up with my AI partners with terrible AI taking lots of damage, no matter what I set their battle strategies to. And Arise is the first console game in the series since Legendia on the PS2 did not have multiplayer, so you can't have your friends assist you. You're stuck with a bad AI throughout the game. And because your CP can't keep up with these long boss fights, you had no choice but to dip into your expensive orange gels. If you played the series before, hearing orange gels being expensive may sound bizarre to you, since they're normally something you can passively buy in bulk without breaking the bank. But in Arise they're 3,000 gold a piece, and for most of the game 3,000 gold can be half, a quarter, or just a significant amount of your money if you're also keeping up with your equipment. Until I got to the dungeon of the final lord in Arise and found an easy money farming method, I was always broke. And anytime I did get some money, it would go right into equipment, maybe 1 or 2 orange shells, and then I'd be broke again. This is annoying, but the real issue here is that it almost seems like at every opportunity it can find, the game wants you to spend real life money on the DLC to make your life easier. The game having optional DLC for money itself, though, isn't an issue. Is an issue when it feels like the first and only Tales game in the series to have constant money issues. Also, it's the first where you're presented with a reminder that there's DLC for you to buy to make your life easier everywhere. Every time you go to save your game, there's a reminder right under it that there's DLC available for you to buy. Every time you rest at a campfire, there's a super random reminder right in your face that there's DLC available for you to buy. Now, if you want to make the argument that this isn't an issue, that's fine. If it doesn't bother you, then there's nothing wrong with that. I just think it's shady in a game I paid full price for there to be ads for microtransactions in my face like I'm playing a free mobile game. And unfortunately, there's one more massive issue related to the DLC I have to talk about that I'm disappointed I haven't seen a single other reviewer mention, and that's the fact for the first time in the series there are DLC exclusive arts. Arts and other helpful skills in Tales of Arise are unlocked via titles. Every title unlocks a skill tree, which you can then spend points to unlock each skill node in whichever order you choose. But some arts are locked behind costume DLC like the swimsuits, and there are no other ways to attain them other than to pay extra money for the respective DLCs. This is a massive red flag for the series going forward and unacceptable. I didn't want to spend so much time talking about the DLC of the game, but it's something I absolutely had to bring up. And remember, like I said in the beginning, the good definitely outweighs the bad in Tales of Arise. The extra time they took to make this game really shows. JRPG areas can get pretty repetitive once you played a lot of them, but pretty much every area in Tales of Arise was a sight to behold, and the updated visuals are stunning when displayed in 4K 60 frames per second. A lot of care was put into making sure you knew this was the next step for the series the moment you start the game up and see the impressive visuals. And the skit conversations of old got a new touch up as well. Instead of the old anime portraits, they're now almost like comic book panels using the characters' in-game models, even reflecting whatever costumes or accessories you have them dressed in. I'll be honest though, I'm kinda indifferent to this new style of skits. If they continue them this way, I won't have an issue, but I also wouldn't bat an eye if they went back to the old style of skits for the next game. All in all, Tales of Arise fulfilled what it set out to do. It really does feel like the Tales series has sprinted into the next generation, and their daring experimentation has paid off with the game already becoming the fastest selling game in series history. It didn't dethrone my favorite Tales games, but if someone were to tell me they consider Tales of Arise the best in the series, I'd understand. Whether you're a longtime fan or someone that wants to jump into the Tales series now, Arise is worth your time.